Okay.
So thanks, guys, for giving up your time, whether you think you had choice or not. It is important to know how your scores are generated. What do they mean? And what does that immediate score you get now on that assessment task, how does that feed into that final score or ATAR that you might be aiming for? So it's a really big topic and there's quite a few concepts to cover, and I'm trying to cover it in less than an hour now. And so I might go a little fast. So if you do have questions, I'm happy to go through it again later if need be. Really, we could have had this talk last year in Year 10 Transitions Week. I might have had a presentation where I touched on some of this with you for Year 11 students. And, you know, the reality is it's not going to make a lot of sense then because it's outside your field of experience. You haven't lived through any part of that. And so it doesn't make sense to you. I mean, that's a fair statement, I think. Now you're in it. You're going to have at least one assessment task back probably for every subject by now. And you would have seen probably on each of those, that task one, that you would have got some feedback in some form written on the task, on the rubric at the end. You'd had colours, shading, ticks on a rubric. You would have had probably a grade of some description on it, which might have a plus or minus. That's not a BSSS part of a grade. That is us just giving you an idea of, did you just pop into that grade? Or are you excelling at that grade and just with a bit more, you'll get to the next grade level? So the pluses and minuses for us are an indication for you to know where you are in that whole scale. And for tertiary students, and I know there's some accredited students here and you're more than welcome to hear the complicated story of tertiary. The feedback and the grades absolutely for accredited, but tertiary's big distinction is you get that score as well. And some of you are seeing scores and sometimes there's a bit of a reactive gasp as you see some of those. It's really important to remember those scores are not a percentage. Like you may have been used to doing tests in the past and getting, you know, 95% or 100%. It is highly unlikely you're going to get 100 on anything in senior school. And it's not because you're not perfect. You may be perfect, but that number does not represent a percentage. It is a ranking. And that ranking is important. It's a ranking within the subject that you're doing at school, and it's a ranking within that subject compared to the ACT. So if you genuinely believe you are one of the top 10% of students in the ACT in a subject area, which you may well be, then you're going to expect those scores in the high 80s, 90s. If you're middly, you're going to expect a middly score somewhere 65, 70, 75, because it's a rank order. It's not a numerical score. And that's really what I want to sort of delve into today. So you do the 3 tasks in a unit. Some subjects you might have 4. Generally speaking, does anyone have 5? Hopefully not. Trying not to overload you. So you'll do those tasks, you'll get those scores for each task, and in the end they come together to form a unit score. And that's calculated as the score you get on the task, multiplied by the weighting, add them up, get a score. At the end of the semester, they get scaled. We're required to scale because that's what the AST does. I've mentioned scores and ranks. It is about how you rank in the whole of the ACT. And for those numbers to be valid, we have to have a big enough sample size. So if you happen to be in a subject where there's 2, 3, 4 of you, anyone with a bit of stats background, you'll know that that's not a big sample size and that's not going to give us valid numbers. So the general rule of thumb is for the numbers to be valid, we need groups of about 25, 30 students. So in something like RE, where every student does the subject, it sits by itself when you get your score for RE in the school. But there are other subjects, as I say, and you'll be aware, you're in little groups. we group those subjects together so that the total number of students is in that 20, 30 plus range, which means the numbers we give you are more valid, and any of the scaling from AST will fairly work on the group. Each of those groups, whether it's a single subject like RE or whether it's a group of subjects, is given a mean and a standard deviation. That represents the strength of that particular group. And when I talk about the strength of a group, what I'm talking about are your AST skills, not your skills and content knowledge of a specific subject area, but your ability to complete the AST to a high level. So what's the AST? There are three. It's the ACT skills test. So it's a skills test. It's not a subject specific set of tests. And it takes place as a multiple choice test, a short response, and an essay. And you'll see that both the multiple choice and short response have got two elements to them, the quantitative and the verbal. So it doesn't matter what your personal preferences might be, you're going to get tested on your ability to read and analyse text, which can include visual texts, and respond in writing to them. It's also going to be your ability with quantitative skills, so reading graphs accurately, interpreting data, as well as some numerical calculations. Now, for some people, either one of those might cause a bit of tension, but I'm not good at. What's really important in senior school is we are developing your skills in those, and we have an AST training program to help continue building your skills, but also those skills are being built up in every one of your subjects as well. So if you see something in a subject and you go, but this is English, why is there an interpretation of a picture or a graph? It's because every subject needs to build these skills with you. In those tests, what they're looking for is what we call higher order thinking skills. So we all know at the bottom is remembering. Whether you can remember something is a skill in remembering. It doesn't actually mean you know anything. Might be good at Trivial Pursuit or Millionaire Hot Seat or whatever, some information factual, I'm going to say regurgitation. It is important to have factual knowledge. It's important to be able to recall quick facts in your subject area. But that's not a skill that the AST is looking for. It's looking for how can you take that information and reframe it? How can you synthesize 2 bits of information, bring it together and present something new? So if you're getting assessment at the moment and you're thinking, I should be doing better, have a look and see how are you doing on the skills that are more the remembering, understanding, which are important things. But if that's where you finish, you're going to be a C. To get a B or an A, you really need to be doing these higher skills of creating, analysing, synthesising, and evaluating. So you have to be able to do that to show that high level. And that's what the AST is testing for. It is particularly around testing for those skills. So that's what we're expecting our teachers to do. Okay, and that's what you're being measured on. So what we are required to do is scale you in each group. And I'm big disclaimer at the bottom there, in that these numbers are made up. They're not the numbers that are being used right at the moment. I put them there for discuss, as I present the discussion. How do we make these numbers up? I actually use a calculation that's based on your Year 9 NAT plan, your Year 11 maths meshing task, and the AST practice test you did during moderation day. Those things come together to give me an indication of how strong you are as a group, but also of the students who do French, well, actually it's French and English, how strong are they? How about the arts people? How strong are they? The science people, put it into the biology, physics, chemistry. take their scores, put them together as a group. How strong are they? So you're taking that information with you as an individual to contribute to the group, and we come up with a mean and standard deviation. If we're wrong, the AST is what's going to really scale you in the end, and it will fix anything that's wrong. And I'll talk about that again later on. We're pretty confident though that we're okay. So with completely made up numbers, English 67, RE the same, 67. That's the average score. The average score of a student doing RE, if this was it, would get 67. The average student doing a science will get a 70. Some of you may know, by a science teacher, maybe that's why it's got a high. That's not how the real world works though. And arts and tech with a 65. There's some people hear about those numbers and they get really worried about them being in a low scaling group. They want to be in a high scaling group. Can I go back to remind you, these numbers came from testing of individuals in each group. It's not imposed year to year at the same level. And what it is 1 year for the year 11s is not the same as the year 12s. It's whatever you come in at. Now let's think again about what those numbers mean. This is my little analogy for you. If we're having a horse race, sometimes we like to think everyone's equal, everyone's fair, let's be nice to everyone. We race along together and get to the same end point. And that's a lovely world to live in. But it's not the reality of what tertiary scores are about. Tertiary scores are about ranking you in the cohort, being the whole of the ACT. So when you're picking your subjects, the race is not full of all of the horses of the same type. There's different types. And in this race, you pick them out, there's the horses we had before, but we've got this cute little pony, very cute, lots of really nice traits. And we've got this sleek looking stallion waiting to go. And they do the race. The reality is the racehorse actually gets to the end first, then the bulk of the group, and there's the little pony trotting along behind. When we do this, Miss Amara has confided in me that she's a pony. She's a pony when it comes to PE. If she was in the group for PE and thinking about what sorts of results she'd get, if PE had a high mean and Miss Amara's in the group, she's going to be coming very slow in the race. But put her in the English race, she's a superstar. She's going to get down to the end while most of you are still trying to get off the starting blocks. So they have, each subject or group of subjects has this different set of numbers that goes with it, which reflects the individuals, and not everyone is going to get the same number. The whole point of this is to spread everyone out based on their skills in that subject area. Okay. So basically you've already made your choices and you've picked subjects, and you might be in the blue, the green, or the red subject group. And each of those subject groups has got a middle. And the reality is that not all groups are equal. That because of the individuals taking those groups, the middle person is actually in a different position depending on the subject. In that top grouping, you might go, if excelling for you as you're looking at it is to the left, you might go, I should be in the green group. Green group's where all the high people are. And if you're a really good student and you're in the blue group, you're not trapped. You can excel in the blue group through your assessment and show that you are exceptionally good. The middle doesn't hold you. If you're exceptional, you will fly off the end. Similarly, if you're in the green group and you think, gee, I'm in the green group because we're better than the red group, but you're in the green group and you're the pony, what's going to happen? you're going to really struggle. You're going to struggle to be able to do the assessment at a level that's expected, and you're actually going to fall right off the bottom. You would have been better being in the red group. So you've made your choices about your subjects now, but you might be, your results might be making you rethink some of those things. And talking to someone about that is important if you're questioning that at this point. But always remember, you can't be the racehorse in everything. And it's better to be in a subject that you feel you can do well in and contribute and learn from, than in one that you think you want to be in because you think all those other people are going to do really well and somehow you're going to get a higher score. You will never get a higher score as a pony in a fast race. Okay. So what are the teachers doing? Well, when they get your work, they're marking it, and they're marking it on a rubric most of the time. There are some tests as well, obviously. But when they're marking it on a rubric, they're giving you a grade. And that grade, you can see from looking at the descriptors of how your work is being presented and the depth and the analysis in it. From that, they enter it into a spreadsheet, which actually then generates a number based on that, what we call the scaling parameter of the group. So sometimes you might go, why did I get 68.75? That's a weird number for a teacher to pull out of the air. Well, they didn't. That's your rank order based on your grade out of all the students who completed the task. So they get that number. So if you're worried about your results and you want to ask for feedback, please do that firstly. Please do that. But when you're asking the question, it's about not I don't like the number or that number's wrong. That number is your rank order. If your number goes up, it means someone else goes down. And if there's been an error, then we should do that. But we can't just put you up because you don't like it. What you've got to do is look at the rubric and how they've marked it from a grade point of view and be able to see if you agree with the teacher or not about the grade decision. If in that conversation you come to a mutual understanding of why that was fair, all's well and good. If you are not convinced that the teacher has applied that rubric properly, you go to the coordinator, the leader of the head of the faculty, and ask them if they can give another opinion. And we talk through that. The last resort is we do an official appeal and we get someone from outside the school to actually remark your work as an outsider to see whether or not they agree more with what we had or where you think you should be. And we will do that if we need to. So don't be afraid in the first part of that to always ask your teachers if you're not sure why you got the grade that you got. But please be careful about saying the number is not right. The number is representing your ranking. There's a little sort of disclaimer there. We are using these scaling parameters. So sometimes if everybody gets a really high result, it's going to skew our data. And sometimes you can get a good result with a not so highly reflected number. And we can talk through that if it happens. But basically tasks should be able to discriminate and spread you out. And sometimes we don't, as teachers, quite hit the mark. But our goal is to do this. If you're all clumped because you were really genuinely clumped, that will show in the data. And that's fair. But generally speaking, we get this spread. And you can see the top person right up the top. I was going to say, and the bottom person's at the bottom. Okay, for this group, I've said the mean is 68. And this is where we're thinking about, well, how do I do well when the median's or the mean's low or middling? This is where the standard deviation is really important. So standard deviation is a measure of how far you are away from the average. So you could be an average student, that's fine. If you want to be a better than average student, you need to be in that standard deviation above. And we call that the Z score. And when you're checking the BSSS website on your student profile, which I hope you do, at the end of the semester, you will see your results with a Z score. But we can also provide you with your Z scores on each task as well. If you've got a Z score of 0, you are spot on average, for whatever group that is. And that could be different between different subjects, but a Z score of 0 means you're average. If you are above average, you've got a positive Z score, and if you're below average, you've got a negative Z score. It's really important to remember when you're playing around with statistics that when you do the median, the average, half of them are going to be above and half of them are going to be below. Doesn't matter what the number is. So if you see a negative number, yes, someone's got to be in the bottom half. Okay, it doesn't necessarily mean the end of the world. So here's an example. How do you do well if the mean of the group is 68? Well, if you've got a Z score of 2, that means you're 2 standard deviations above the average. So if the average is 68, my little calculation is there for you to work out. 2 times the 11.5, add it to the 68. The student at the top can be getting a 91. So you can think about the 68 and go, oh, that's a bad scoring group, which is not true. But as an individual, you can get 91. And top students should be getting Z scores in the 2s to the low 2 pluses something. Similarly, go to the other end. A Z score of -2 is going to be 2 standard deviations below the average. You can do that calculation again. I'm sure you're quickly doing mental arithmetic. 45. So the actual range of scores of individuals in this group is 45 to 91. Okay. 91 is fantastic. So if I tell you, if you're getting 90, 91s on anything, you are doing phenomenally well. If you manage to pull a 93 across all your subjects, or the 4 subjects that'll count, you will get a 99 plus ATAR. It's not a one-to-one. And I'll come back to this later. 70 is the ACT average for everything. Everything, and so a 70 score will translate to about a 70 ATAR. Everything above 70 will actually stretch up a bit higher, and everything below 70 will stretch a bit lower. So the closer you are to 70, the more one-to-one it is, the further out you go, the bigger the change. So you don't need 99 in your assessment to get a 99 ATAR. You need a 93. That's still a big ask because a 99 ATAR means you're in the top 1% of students in the ACT. And we celebrate that we had one last year. And his scores in all the subjects he counted was 93s. So don't despair that you're not getting hundreds. Hundreds in this context are almost meaningless. It's like there's so many points, they're thrown away. So 93 is the magic number there. And just again to look at the reality, here's our original scaling parameters for the 4 subjects that I'd set up at the beginning. If we go for a Z score 2, even though those means are quite different, 89, RE will be the same, of course, 91 and 90. So they're pretty close now. If you're the top student getting a Z score of 2, even though the median score or mean score is up and down, the top students can still be getting about the same scores. If you're really doing fantastically and you get a Z score of 2.5, obviously your scores are going to be higher. And now there's very little difference between those. And in my particular example, which might have been carefully crafted to make the point, you'll see that science and art, a student with a Z score of 2.5 actually gets the exact same score because art might be a lower mean, but it's got a bigger spread. So if you're doing 2.5 Z scores above, that bigger spread actually pulls you up, right up with the science one in this example. And in fact, 2 years ago, it was, and I know I've said it before, in the whole of the ACT, dance was the highest. The student with the highest score for any subject in the ACT was in dance. Last year it was back into a maths physics area. But there is no reason why a student with excellent skills and higher order thinking cannot excel in any subject that they choose to take. So for year 11s, you've got a little while. Year 12s coming closer. Second semester of year 12 is when you do the AST. That's when they actually measure the strength of the group. So it's really important to keep in mind the final numbers are not going to come until you've done the AST. Then we get certification at the end of year 12. We don't know how well you've done or not in the AST until we see your results at the end of year 12. So you can do that test and ask us, but we do not know the answer until the very, very end. So it remains a bit of a mystery for us and a celebration once we actually see the results. So that AST, when you sit it, you do those 3 tests. It's testing those higher order skills and specifically looking at your verbal and quantitative skills. You individually will get a scaling score from that test. And you take that scaling score into all of your subjects. And so then they group you and work out, well, now what's the scale overall for the sciences group at JPC? What's the scaling group for all the maths at JPC and for every other group that we have? So it's really important to keep honing those skills, and we work with you, particularly in Year 12, around how to do the AST so that you do well at that. So in your subjects, that's hopefully a framework to understand what those numbers mean and how you can excel in any group that you're in. At the end of your time at school, we'll create a course score. So you've got your 4 units and we'll create a course score. The wonderful thing about the ACT is the protection it has inbuilt for students, so that you don't need to, I know sometimes that's hard, but you don't need to stress as much as your colleagues across the border in New South Wales or in Victoria or now in Queensland. They have those really high value tests at the end of Year 12, and so much of their score relates to that test. You've got the AST, but it's a skills test. Your results in your subjects are what you do at school, assessed by the teachers who are teaching you. So that's a good point to start with. The other point is when you do your subjects, in the end, your course score does not use all your unit scores in the calculation. So you've got some protection, redundancy in there. If you're doing a minor, that means you do it for Year 11 and drop it for Year 12. You've done 2 units. 1.6 of them will count. So there's a little bit of throwaway. So 0.6 times your lower score will be added in, not the whole lot. For a major, where you've done 4 units, 2.8 count. That means a whole semester is put away. Now, in the current situation, we can think, well, is there an impact on your results in Year 11 or Year 12 with the current, face-to-face, remote, back to face-to-face? Is that impacting you? Different people, different amounts. But if this happens to be your worst semester, it is not going to count in a major. If actually this semester has been okay for you, as far as getting your assessment done, but actually you really had trouble adjusting in term 1, well, actually we're only in semester 1, aren't we? Let's say you get through this semester and next semester, it's a bit flat. Maybe you've got some personal issues, maybe there's some family issues. Unexpected, you don't know about it, can't plan for it. Maybe next semester is not the best semester for you. Or maybe it's not till Year 12. Something happens in Year 12. It doesn't matter where, The semester that's your lowest is the one that's discounted. And it doesn't have to be the same semester for every subject. For one subject, it can be semester 1, another one semester 2, and for 2 subjects, it could be semester 4. Maybe you switched off at the end of year 12 and that you actually dropped. So there's protection there, and for the visual of you, so the darker red is what counts, and then the pink is what's not counting. If you're doing a double major, so it would be your maths, could be doing an English literature double major, could be histories. Actually, 2 whole units don't count. So it's not about giving up and not trying. It's about always trying your best, but knowing that there's a protection for you if things don't go so well. So in the end, when we're talking about these course scores, you've got your 4 units. That makes a major. And let's just say these were your results. And it was semester 3 that was not so crash hot, for whatever reason it was. If everything counted equally, so they were weighted 1, you'd add up those scores, divide by 4 to work out the average, the course score. And there'd be 74. You go, okay, 74 is okay. But it's a real bummer that we had the 62. If only I hadn't put the 60, if only the 62 hadn't happened. Well, the good thing is we're only counting 2.8. The 62 is not going to count. We're only going to count the ones with the ticks. And of those, which one is the next lowest score? Yep, the 73. So 73 is only going to count 0.8. So 0.8 of 73 is 58.4. Now we add them up and divide by 2.8. Now your course score is 78.7. So there's a real advantage in the calculations by dropping out the things that are really poor by comparison, and a discount on the next one. You might be in a position where you've been strong the whole way through. You still get this applied. It's not a conditional thing. Every single one of you will have the same thing happen. It may be that you've got an 85 that's thrown out, and other people will be sitting next to you crying, if only I could take your 85. But whatever the lowest is, it's the one that goes. So if anything in the current situation, it's always about striving to do your best, but there are protections in there for you. If semester 1, year 11, happens to be your worst semester, you were transitioning to high school, you had a worldwide pandemic, and anything else that's happened, I mean, who would imagine saying that last year?
Couldn't imagine that.
Can't imagine that. If this happens to be your worst semester, it'll be the one that gets put to the side. But you keep trying in the next semesters. Your goal obviously is to do better, always. At the end, you'll get an academic record that looks something like that. It'll have groups of 4s. It'll have your individual scores on the units. It'll have your grades, and it'll have this course score, which will take that 1.6, 2.8, etc. into consideration. We don't choose that. You don't choose that. It just calculates. I tried to pick a run-of-the-mill example of someone who's got a nice tidy package. Generally speaking, and
What's the raw score and the course score? What's the difference between them?
They're the exact same.
Yeah. Technically, the raw score is the straight calculation. The course score should take the AST into account, but it's not showing on this printout. And when you look at profiles online, you'll see them definitely being the same because you don't have an AST factor coming into it. So for the most parts, you'll see it is actually looking the same. But on your final academic record that you get from the Beach Boys at the end, you'll see the scaled course score. Okay, BSSS, nothing's easy. So we're okay with our means for our subjects and our individual scores and our discounted scores to make our course scores. But when they come to the end, they've got to put I said, these numbers are rank orders. And you can imagine making a rank order of, I'm trying to think how many students in the ACT?
3,000.
3,000. So you've got 3,000 students, and if you try and fit them on a scale that's only 100, it's going to be really, really crowded. So instead of making a scale out of 100, the BSSS rescale all those numbers. And instead of the mean being 70 and the standard deviation being 12.5, they turn it into 150, 25. So the average student in any subject would get 150, and then your standard deviations. 25 is 1 standard deviation, 50 would be 2 standard deviations. Mostly this is stuff that happens at the end that you're just too excited to see a number. You don't necessarily think it through as to how it's all calculated. But I'm just taking these few minutes to explain it to you so you know there is a process to it, and maybe a bit of understanding. So very roughly speaking, whatever score you're getting from school, you double it and add 10. So very simply, if you had 70, double it, 140, add 10, 150. So it's not exactly perfect, but as a rough guide, double add 10, that is what your rescaled scores will be. So, final calculation. This student happens to have 5 majors and 2 minors. The course score numbers are underneath. So they're those ones that are rescaled to the 150. If you want to back design them, 151, take 10 off, 141, divide by 2, it's going to be 70.5. So the course score to start with was 70.5, and then they've rescaled it. So this student's pretty standard on average for most subjects. And then, oh, that 120, they didn't like that subject, whatever it was. How is the final calculation done? We know that those course scores are discounted, that one of those units in a major is already out the door. To get an ATAR, your 3 best majors count. Most of you, not all, most of you will have 5 majors and a minor. Some of you will have 4 majors and 2 minors. The absolute minimum you can have and still get an ATAR is 3 majors and 3 minors. The problem with going through with 3 majors and 3 minors is 3 majors count. You've got no backup, you've got no protection. If you've got 4 or 5 majors, the 3 best ones are going to count. Now your 4th best subject counts. It can be a major or a minor. It doesn't make any difference. So in this case, is it a major or a minor that ranks 4th? I heard one answer that was correct. Yeah, the minor. So this person's got 2 extra majors. It doesn't matter. The next highest score is a minor. So that's what's going to count. How it works is your 3 best majors count as 1, their value of 1, and your 4th best subject, whether it is a major or a minor, counts 0.6, so 60% of the score. Put that together and you get 542. Okay, which is a pretty meaningless number when we're just looking at it like that. But are you okay with the idea? It's only 4 subjects that count in your ATAR. So if you've bombed out on a subject and you think it's the end of the world, it's not. That subject will not count in your ATAR. As long as you've got 4 strong subjects, doesn't matter how badly you did on 1 or 2 subjects. As long as you've got 4 good ones for you. We add those up and we get a magic number of 400 and 542. There's a lookup table. This changes every year. They don't really release it. We sort of try and backwards by design create them. But they actually create them every year based on the results of the schools, what the schools generate as numbers. They try and get the AST results to match, and they keep tweaking this until they're happy with the alignment. It's ballpark, like it will never change 10, but it can make a difference, particularly when you're striving for the very top. It worked in our favour last year. It actually pulled down a pip and really helped our top. So this student, if you remember, got 542 and 542 is somewhere between the two numbers there in the middle, which means this student will get an ATAR somewhere between 75 and 80. Now, obviously the BSSS have all the subdivisions of that, and they're very accurate and precise to 2 decimal places as to what your ATAR is. So that's just a rough guide of how they do it. I guess the take home is, if you're getting around 70s, you're going to get an ATAR in your 4 best subjects. If you're getting around 70s, you're going to get an ATAR about 70. That will get you into UC, ACU. If you're getting an ATAR in the high 70s, sorry, if you're getting course scores in the high 70s, 78, 79, you would get an ATAR likely to be in the 80, and you'll get into ANU. So if you want to get to ANU, you aim for about 80, but you'll get in with a bit less because it stretches. If you wanted a 99, you have to be realistic about that. You need to know that you would be in the top 1% of students in the ACT and New South Wales, because we're actually meshed with them as well. And that would suggest that you're doing lots of competitions and you're topping them, and lots of fantastic work everywhere all the time. But 93 again was that magic number. And 93 stretches to an ATAR of 99. So sometimes when students are getting results, they get really worried that they're not going to get the ATAR they need. But it's because they're thinking of the one-to-one. They think that if they're getting a score of 72, that they won't get the 75 they need. Well, it does stretch. They're also not thinking about the discounted units, and they're not thinking about the discounted courses that come into the calculation of the ATAR. So in the end, we try and give you estimates at the end of year 11 and mid-year 12, where it's an educated guess, because we're using averages of your course score, of your unit scores, because we can't apply, it's called the 80% rule. We can't apply the 80% rule because we don't know at the end of year 11 what unit to discount. You've only done 2 of them and we can't discount them. So we're only going to give you a rough guide, and we also don't know how you're going to do in the AST. We do what we think, but if 1, we underestimate, and 2, you are really upskilling through AST training and learning as you go through your senior studies, you might go into the AST as a group and blitz it. In which case, all the scores you've seen at the end of every semester, the course scores will actually go up and your ATAR will be higher. So that is a teamwork thing. Everything I've talked about so far is about ranking. You against all the other people sitting here. You want to get higher than the person next to you if you want to get a better result. When it comes to the AST, which scales you as a group, it's a team game. You as a whole group, the better you can do, means out of the whole of the ACT, we get more and our scores can go up. So that's why we focus on that at various times, and why we ask you to do practices, because we want to do the training for the team to get a good team result in the end. So yeah, the better you do in the AST, there might be a nice surprise at the end that actually everyone gets a little bit more than we expected. I guess just to perhaps give some reality or some confidence maybe for you, that this is last year's results. That 13% of our graduates last year had over 90, so a 90+ score. more than a third of them got over 80. That means a third of the students you knew here in Year 12 last year could have gone directly to ANU if they wanted, if that's what their aspiration is. 2/3 of all our students got over 70 and almost 90% got over 60. So, you know, you can do really well if you work hard. And the numbers show that the people before you have shown they can do it. You know who those people were. You know who the Year 12s were last year. So if they can do it, you can do it. But it's, you know, it's doing your best at all times. And if you've ever got questions, making sure you ask. And just so you're interested, if you were interested, that's where they did go last year. They went off to ANU, Defence Forces, TAFE, UNSW, ACU, and a few were off to work straight away because that's what they wanted to do. So what you do afterwards is up to you. Those options are there for you. The doorways are open for you, and you've just got 2 years to just do the best you can and be realistic about your targets, and keep in mind all those little calculation, they're not tricks, but keep all those little things in mind when you might get a little down about something that you've received as a result. Just keep in mind all those little protections that the ACT system has in place for all of the students. Is there anything else, Ms. Amara?
I guess, does anybody have questions? And just remembering, I am recording, so if we can just try and keep the questions one at a time so I can capture the question and answer.
So regarding points that you might get for, say, extracurricular or stuff like families moving around during school, how does that work?
So if you, there are what used to be called bonus points, and I like to call them that for ease. Some universities offer bonus points for various criteria. ANU offers some bonuses if you've done certain subjects and achieved at a certain level. There are other advantage, reflecting disadvantage, movement, other medical family issues. Those ones get added on by UAC when they actually do the ATAR number. Some of the disadvantaged ones don't actually get added, so take that off. What they do is you get your ATAR. Your ATAR might be 89, but you might qualify for additional points for one of those reasons. You'll still get an ATAR that says 89, but the university that gives the extra points for having done certain subjects, they will take that into account when they're looking at the entrance score they need. They will treat you as a 90. So maybe you've got 5 bonus points. They'll treat you as a 94. You're going to get into law. So they will add it on as the university. Sometimes if it's a disadvantage reason that you're getting special consideration, you'll still take your 89 and suddenly you'll just get into a course and you don't really know why. They'll just take you in. So they won't ever actually come to you and say, we're giving this to you. You just magically get into the course you want, but you know that that's right. Any other questions? You know exactly how your scores are now done. You're confident about your work. You know that the grade you get on each task is really the critical point. The grade is what's going to feed into this entire process. How well you do on that rubric for the majority of subjects is really the key